April 17th, 1945, Western Germany, 5:12 p.m. The war in Europe is grinding toward its bloody end, yet death still hides beneath the soil, silent, patient, and merciless. The 104th Infantry Division has just halted outside a narrow farm road, the only supply route for miles. The air smells of wet earth, burning timber, and the sharp metallic tang of spent ammunition. But that isn't what freezes the men in place. It's the mines. The Germans, in retreat, have littered the lane with explosives, some hastily buried, others wired to tree roots, and still more pressed just beneath the mud with cruel precision. A single mistake on that road could shred a squad in an instant, and the Americans know it. Their engineers are an hour away. Nightfall is 3. Without clearing this lane, the division's wounded cannot be evacuated. Their supplies cannot advance, and the entire left flank remains exposed. The clock is ticking, so the infantry waits, tense and exhausted, on the edge of a killing field. Among them stands Private Leonard Hart, a 21-year-old from a small Nebraska dairy farm. He has no explosives training, no engineering background. In fact, his job before the war was hauling hay bales and mending fences. Yet fate has a strange sense of timing. Minutes earlier, a German artillery shell ruptured the unit's supply cart. Equipment everywhere, shattered crates, spilled tools, and a dented tin bucket rolling to a stop at Hart's feet. And for reasons he cannot explain, Hart picks it up. His sergeant, grim and impatient, snaps at him. "We're not bailing water, kid. Drop it." But Hart doesn't drop it. He stares at the bucket, then stares at the road, his eyes narrowing as a memory flickers, one that has nothing to do with war. Back home, early spring rains would soak the fields, sinking into the soft soil, except where rocks or buried debris lay underneath. The water pooled differently on those spots, forming irregular patterns. Hart's father used it to find old tools lost under the mud. Hart wonders, could the same simple idea work here? The thought is reckless, dangerous, maybe even suicidal. But the alternative is to waste precious hours or send men straight into a minefield blind. The wind cuts across the road. Machine gun fire crackles faintly in the distance. Hart tightens his grip on the bucket. Behind him, soldiers mutter anxiously. Ahead of him, the mines wait. He steps forward. His sergeant swears under his breath. "This is madness," he says. But something in Hart's calm, steady posture stops him from pulling the private back. Hart kneels at the edge of the muddy road. He scoops water from a shell crater, cold, dirty, and dark, and fills the bucket halfway. The men around him fall silent, as if witnessing the first moves of a man digging his own grave. Then, with a quiet steadiness that seems almost unreal amid the chaos of war, Hart tilts the bucket and pours a thin stream of water on the ground. For a few seconds, nothing happens.
Then, the infantrymen see it. The water spreads, then hesitates, then pools in an odd, uneven shape, refusing to sink into the soil. Hart's eyes lock onto the anomaly. "There's something buried here," he says, voice low but certain. 2 soldiers inhale sharply. Someone whispers a prayer. Hart moves a wooden stick along the outline of the pooling water. The shape is unmistakable. The edges are too straight, too clean. A teller mine. He has found one, without touching it. The sergeant steps closer, stunned. How the hell did you? Hart doesn't answer. Instead, he fills the bucket again. And again. The road ahead stretches into the trees, dark and unmoving. But for the first time, the men feel the faint spark of possibility. Could this actually work? Because if it can, their company might just survive the night. But the minefield is deeper than anyone expects, and what Hart is about to discover will change the course of their advance and test the limits of luck, intuition, and sheer nerve. Private Hart moves slowly, deliberately, the bucket sloshing lightly in his grip. The infantry behind him watches with an almost reverent silence, as if any sudden noise might shatter the fragile miracle unfolding before them. He pours a second stream of water a few feet ahead. Again, the water behaves strangely, rolling to one side before gathering in a sluggish, unnatural puddle. Hart marks the spot with a snapped branch. Another mine. The sergeant exhales, a sound halfway between disbelief and awe. You've got to be kidding me. But Hart is already on the move. A third pour. A fourth. A fifth. Each time he studies how the water slides, stalls, or runs. Where the soil is untouched, the water disappears evenly, swallowed by thirsty dirt. But over hidden metal, the wet earth resists, stiffens, and forces the water into warped shapes. It is crude science, primitive, not in any manual ever written. But it works. Within 10 minutes, Hart has marked 9 mines, more than the unit's engineers sometimes detect in an hour under battlefield pressure. The mood among the soldiers shifts. What was terror becomes cautious optimism. What was paralysis becomes movement. A corporal, older and scarred from the Battle of Aachen, shakes his head. Kid, you might just be the luckiest man in Germany. But luck has little to do with it. Hart's entire childhood trained him for this moment. Years of reading fields, watching how water pooled during storms, feeling the earth change under shifting seasons. He just never imagined those farm lessons would matter in a war. A breeze kicks up, scattering loose dust down the lane. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a German machine gun crackles and mortar fire thuds in the distance. The enemy is close, and the Americans know the Germans love booby traps, secondary charges, and false trails. Hart knows it too, but he keeps going. He reaches a tight bend in the road, dangerous territory. Mines here are usually placed to catch vehicles as they swerve. Hart pours another stream. This one reacts violently. The water jerks sideways as if repelled, forming a sharp crescent curve before draining at the edges. Hart freezes. That's not one mine. That's 2, side by side.
The sergeant's jaw tightens. A double placement is rare, nasty, deadly, and it means one thing. The Germans weren't just slowing the Americans, they wanted to obliterate anything coming through. Hart marks both carefully, then signals for more sticks. The men scramble to supply him. For the first time since the road halted them, the soldiers feel useful, essential, united. A private from Chicago mutters, "This kid is outsmarting German engineers with a bucket." Another replies, "And it's working." Hart presses on. By the 20-minute mark, he has found 17 mines. At 30 minutes, 26. At 35, the number rises to 35. Each detection boosts morale. Each marked mine pushes back the shadow of death that hung over the company, and each step Hart takes feels heavier, more dangerous, because the pattern is becoming clear. The minefield is far more extensive than they thought. Not a quick retreat trap, not a sloppy defense, but a meticulously planned kill zone designed by veteran Wehrmacht engineers to trap tanks, trucks, and infantry in one devastating sweep. If Hart fails, if he slips, if the water betrays him, if he misreads even a single patch of earth, it won't just be him who dies, it'll be half the company. Still, he moves forward. Sweat stings his eyes, his hands tremble from cold and adrenaline, but his focus never wavers. Then, after almost 40 minutes, he reaches a small rise in the road. The trees part slightly, revealing the far end of the lane. Beyond it lies open ground. Freedom. Relief trickles through the squad, but just as Hart lifts the bucket for what he hopes is the final pour, he notices something unsettling. The soil ahead is too smooth, too perfect, as if someone swept it clean. He pours the water, and the reaction is immediate. The water doesn't pool, it doesn't hesitate, it vanishes instantly, too fast. Hart's blood goes cold, because that can mean only one thing: a trap within a trap. The Germans have disguised a pressure plate trigger beneath thin, loose sand. One step too hard, and every mine in a 10-yard radius could detonate in a chain reaction. The men behind Hart stiffen. "Hart!" the sergeant whispers. But the young private slowly lowers the bucket, eyes scanning the ground with new understanding. He's no longer just detecting mines. He's unraveling a German engineering puzzle designed to kill everyone on that road. Hart crouches, studying the unnaturally smooth patch of sand. No wind could have made it that perfect. Someone shaped it, deliberately, precisely. A German engineer had stood here not long ago. A professional, a killer. Hart steps back carefully and gestures for the sergeant. It's not just mines. There's a main charge, big one, buried deep. The sand's too loose. Something's breathing underneath it. The sergeant's face drains of color. A buried main charge meant a single trigger could set off the entire minefield like a chain of fireworks. The road, the trees, the men, they would vanish in a blast so violent it would leave a crater. "Can you find it?" the sergeant asks. Hart doesn't answer. He fills the bucket again. Each pour becomes slower, more deliberate. He widens his circle, tracing how the soil responds. The water behaves unnaturally in a broad arc, funneling toward an invisible center beneath the surface. There, a slight depression, almost imperceptible, a place where the soil collapses quicker, an indication of a hollow beneath. Hart marks the area with 3 branches tied together in a triangle. That, he says quietly, is the heart of it. The engineers move in, their nerves visibly frayed. They dig at a snail's pace, brushing aside dirt grain by grain. After 2 minutes, one gasps. A pressure plate, steel, circular, wired to multiple charges, lurks just below the thin skin of soil. One wrong move and the entire lane would have been vaporized. The sergeant turns to Hart. "You just saved all of us." But Hart isn't finished. He returns to his grid with bucket in hand, scanning the last 20 feet of roadway with renewed caution. 5 more mines reveal themselves. Then 3. Then one final, stubbornly hidden teller mine near a fallen pine branch.
By the end, the count stands at 40 mines, each one located without a single detonation. 40 potential deaths. 40 booby traps. 40 silent killers neutralized by one soldier with a bucket and an instinct for reading the earth. The sun is beginning to set as the engineers give the final signal. The road is clear. Safe for trucks, safe for men. The rifle company moves forward. Tired, shaken, but alive. As they march, soldiers clap Hart on the shoulder. Some shake his hand. Others simply stare at him with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. The sergeant remarks, "You do realize, kid, if you hadn't been here, we'd be writing letters home right now." Hart only shrugs. "Just used what I knew." But word spreads. Within hours, officers hear of the feat. Within days, the story reaches divisional command. A private, with no engineering training, solved a problem that had stumped professionals since the early years of the war. And he solved it using a method so simple, so unconventional, that no doctrine had ever considered it. Later analysis would confirm what Hart discovered by instinct. Slight variations in soil density cause water to flow differently over buried metal and packed explosive casings. Only an experienced eye, trained by years outdoors, can read those subtle movements. Hart's farm upbringing, once dismissed as irrelevant, had given him a skill that outperformed the most advanced mine detection strategies of 1945. He never wrote a manual, never patented a method, never claimed he invented anything. He simply said, "It was the only tool I had." In the weeks following the Ruhr operation, his technique was quietly adopted by several units in the field, sometimes saving lives, sometimes buying precious seconds in chaotic fighting. But none matched Hart's original performance. Because what Hart accomplished that evening wasn't just clever improvisation. It was something far rarer in war. A moment where instinct outpaced technology, where common sense triumphed over lethal engineering, where one soldier's simple, stupid idea became the thin line between life and death. And so, 40 mines remained silent. 40 men were spared. And a battered road in Germany, meant to be a grave, became a testament to human ingenuity under fire. Private Leonard Hart would finish the war a month later, return to his family farm, and never speak of the event unless asked directly. Modesty came naturally to him. But among the men of the 104th Infantry Division, one story became legend. The day a kid with a rusty bucket outsmarted the German war machine.